I'm so glad you're here. I hop on here at least 2 to 5 times a week. I try to get on here and help encourage you and move you forward in your relationship growth. I know how hard that is, though. It's not as simple as just watching one video and going, "Oh, I got it. I'm good to go now." It it's much more difficult than that because we establish patterns that stick with us and we repeat those patterns over and over again. And even if we want something to change really badly, we still have a hard time because we are creatures of habit. We do things the same way over and over again, including how we communicate with one another. When I taught at Biola University in Southern California, one of my classes was a seminar in therapeutic techniques. And I had, I believe, 16 students in the class. We kept it small on purpose. I had two part time TAs, teaching assistants, that would come into the class for labs. And it was one of the most profound experiences, at least according to the students, that they had as senior psychology majors. What they were doing is they were learning what it was like to be a therapist. But what they got from it was so much more than that. Now, when we started the class, what I did was I made sure that I paired the students with the other students that they knew the least. And that's hard to do at a private school when you've only got 16 students and they're all senior psychology majors. That basically means that they've been going to school together for at least 3 years. They've been in classes with one another over and over again. So they've got some established patterns in how they talk with one another. And that's the very reason why I tried to pair them up. And I had a little game that I played to get them to be with those students that they knew the least. And it worked out pretty well for the most part. But what they found out after doing 10 weeks of the lab, and it was simply a listening lab, the very basic skill that you need to become a therapist is the ability to listen to what someone else is saying, to track not only the words they're saying, but also the feeling behind the words, the process that they're going through to get the deeper meaning. We oftentimes, with our friends and our family, those people that we're around, we assume we know. And so we create this back and forth, and we rarely really stop and listen to what the other person is saying. So for 10 weeks, we would do this. We would have a lab, and we would break it down into 4 groups of 4. And I would sit with one of the groups, and each one of my TAs would sit with other groups. And then one group was on their own, and then we would rotate. But we would do 10-minute talking sessions, really, and they were based on the concept of client centered therapy or client centered counseling that was pioneered by Carl Rogers, if you want to do some research on that. What they would do is that one student would play the client, another student would play the therapist, and the other two students and the TA or myself, if we happened to be in one of those groups, we would be the observers. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, we would ask the client what it felt like to sit with their therapist. Did they feel comfortable? Did they feel like they could talk about whatever? Did they get the impression that the therapist understood what they were trying to say? So we would always ask for feedback from the client first. The second person we would ask would be the therapist. We would say, what was that like for you to listen to your client? What do you think they were trying to say? What were they feeling? What was the process they were describing? And how did it feel to you to try to listen and engage with that person? Then the last person that we would ask in the group were the observers. What did you observe about the interactions? Did the client seem comfortable? Did the therapist seem open and welcoming? It was really a fun exercise, and they found out how hard it is to actually sit and listen to people. I've been doing this for more than 25 years, so I actually have a hard time not listening to people because when I'm in a group, especially of people that are talking, It really bothers me when people talk over one another, which is a common thing to do, but I don't want to miss anything that somebody's saying. So I can get a little frustrated in a normal group. And when I listen to somebody talk, I'm not just hearing the words they're saying, I'm hearing the meaning behind those words. And I hear people many times crying out to be understood. That's probably the biggest thing that my students would take away from that course. The first thing, of course, was whether or not they thought they could make it their life's career to listen to people and to give them gentle feedback and encouragement along the way. There was more to the class than just the lab. We talked about, probably about 12 different therapeutic approaches to counseling. So they had that as well, but it was the labs that made the difference. And that it helped them decide, is this something that I think I could do? And for some of them, they loved it. And it was like, this is so what I want to do. I'm right on track. And other students were like, I could not do this. This is just way too hard. But the thing that happened for virtually every student in the class, and I say virtually because, of course, there's always some exceptions, but by and large, I heard from my students, I hear people differently now. Now, they didn't do it long enough that it made conversations difficult for them, like it has for me sometimes in some settings, because I listen differently than the average person does. I mean, I've got a doctorate in listening. It's hard to turn that off. But they would come back and they would tell me, and the feedback that they would put on the reviews for the class were that they noticed how many times people talk over one another. They noticed how many times they missed something important, even about a best friend. That there were things that their best friend was saying that they hadn't heard before. Now, they heard them, but they hadn't heard them before. And taking this class really made a huge difference. That's one of the things I've always done when I work with couples, is that I have moved that lab class from the university classroom into my sessions with clients, where I teach clients stuff. So we've got the theory, we've got all the things that they can apply, but then we really learn to listen to one another. What is your spouse actually saying to you? What are the messages that are more subtle, that are in the tone of voice or in the facial expressions or the body language, or even the pattern of what they're talking about, the subjects that they choose to disclose or to bring up? What is that telling you about who they are? And for those that are ready for that level of depth in understanding one another, it turns out to be really powerful. I love working with couples who are ready to hear what the other person has to say, because you're never going to get anywhere if you don't hear each other. Even those people who don't have a spouse that is willing to engage in the process with them, even by just teaching one person how to listen differently, how to hear what their spouse is really saying. What's that underlying message? What's the bottom line question? What is it they're really trying to communicate? What are they asking for from you? That can actually change the dynamic of the relationship completely. Because if you've ever had somebody really hear you and understand you, you know how powerful that can be. So that's how I do it. That's how I've done it. That's how I probably always will do it. And I hope that information helps you in your journey. If there's anything else I can do to help, be sure and click the link below. I'd love to talk to you.